think your life is made of choices? But it's mostly echoes. Every phrase you say, every habit you repeat, every gesture you perform without thinking is not yours. It's inherited. You're living inside rituals so old, their meanings have vanished, but the motions remain. Today, we're going to dig up the stories buried inside 25 everyday things you say or do. And once you hear them, you'll never speak the same way again. Number 1. Saying cheers. When you raise your glass and say, cheers, you're performing a ritual that began in the shadow of betrayal. In medieval Europe, poisoning was a common way to eliminate rivals, so hosts began clinking their cups together, hard enough that wine would splash from one vessel into the other. If you drank after that, it meant you trusted him not to kill you. Over time, the gesture softened, the danger faded, and the toast became a symbol of friendship. But every time you say cheers, you're echoing a moment where survival depended on trust. Number 2. Saying close but no cigar. At 19th century carnivals, cigars were handed out as prizes for winning games, and if you missed by a hair, the carny would shout, "Close, but no cigar," reminding you that almost doesn't count when the reward is real. It wasn't just a throwaway phrase. It was a public reminder that effort without success still meant walking away empty-handed. Today, we use it casually, but it began as a sting, a taunt, a moment of playful humiliation wrapped in tobacco-scented disappointment. Number 3. Saying butter someone up. In ancient India, people seeking divine favor would throw balls of clarified butter, ghee, at statues of the gods. It was a literal offering, a sticky bribe to win blessings. Over time, the act of buttering up transformed from religious ritual into social strategy. Now, when you flatter someone to get what you want, you're reenacting a sacred transaction. Except instead of gods, it's bosses, dates, or gatekeepers. And the butter is verbal. Number 4. Saying, get off your high horse. Back when horses were status symbols, the taller your horse, the more powerful you were perceived to be. Nobles and military leaders rode high to be seen and obeyed. So telling someone to get off their high horse wasn't just about arrogance. It was a demand to descend from privilege, to speak like a commoner, to stop performing superiority. Today, it's still a call to humility, but it began as a literal challenge to power. Number 5. Saying, as mad as a hatter. Hat makers in the 18th century used mercury to treat felt, and the fumes caused tremors, hallucinations, and erratic behavior. The madness wasn't metaphor, it was chemical. These poisoned craftsmen became cultural symbols of eccentricity, and the phrase, mad as a hatter, stuck. Lewis Carroll didn't invent it, he just immortalized it. Every time you say it, you're referencing a forgotten epidemic of industrial toxicity disguised as whimsy. Number 6. Saying, hold your horses. In the age of cavalry and horse-drawn carriages, hold your horses was a literal command to stop moving forward until the signal was given. It was about control, timing, and discipline. Today, it's a casual way to say, wait, but it began as a shouted order in the chaos of battle or travel. When you say it now, you're echoing a moment where patience wasn't polite. It was survival. Number 7. Saying, let the cat out of the bag. At medieval markets, dishonest sellers would swap piglets for cats and tie them in sacks. If a buyer opened the bag before leaving, they'd expose the trick. So, letting the cat out of the bag became shorthand for revealing a hidden truth. It wasn't just a slip, it was a moment of revelation. a breach of secrecy that turned deception into spectacle. Today, it's gossip. Back then, it was justice. Number 8. Saying raining cats and dogs. In Old England, heavy rain would wash debris, and sometimes dead animals, off rooftops and into the streets. The phrase raining cats and dogs wasn't poetic, it was grim. Some theories also link it to Norse mythology, where cats symbolized storms and dogs represented wind. Either way, it's a phrase born from chaos. From weather so violent, it felt like the sky was throwing animals at you. Number 9. Saying steal someone's thunder. A playwright named John Dennis invented a machine to mimic thunder on stage. But when another production copied it and got more praise, he complained that they had stolen his thunder. The phrase stuck as a metaphor for stolen credit, but it began as literal theft of sound, of invention, of applause. Every time you use it, you're referencing a moment where creativity was hijacked and recognition was denied. Number 10. Saying white elephant. In Southeast Asia, white elephants were considered sacred but financially ruinous. Kings would gift them to rivals as a form of sabotage, because the upkeep was so expensive it could bankrupt the recipient. Today, a white elephant is a useless gift, but it started as a weapon disguised as generosity. It's not just waste, it's strategic burden. Number 11. Saying red tape. British bureaucrats in the 16th century used red ribbon to bind official documents, and the more ribbon involved, the slower the process. Red tape became the symbol of administrative delay, of systems designed to stall rather than serve. It's not just paperwork, it's ritualized obstruction. Every time you say it, you're cursing a tradition of inefficiency wrapped in literal ribbon. Number 12. Saying no spring chicken. In colonial New England, spring chickens sold for more than older birds, and if someone tried to pass off an old hen at spring prices, they'd be called out. The phrase became a cheeky way to say someone's past their youthful prime. It wasn't about age, it was about value, deception, and the economics of freshness. Today, it's playful. Back then, it was a warning. Number 13. Saying skeleton in the closet. Victorian families were obsessed with reputation, and when scandals, especially crimes or illnesses, threatened their image, they'd hide the evidence, sometimes literally, behind closed doors. The phrase skeleton in the closet wasn't metaphor, it was a dark reality. It's a reminder that silence can be strategic, and that every polished surface might be hiding bones. Number 14. Saying cold shoulder. In Old English hospitality, when a guest overstayed their welcome, they were served a cold shoulder of meat instead of a hot meal. A passive-aggressive signal that it was time to leave. It wasn't rudeness, it was coded etiquette. Today, giving someone the cold shoulder feels casual, but it began as a culinary cue for emotional distance. Number 15. Saying upper hand. In medieval duels, the fighter whose hand was higher on the sword hilt had more control and leverage. Having the upper hand wasn't metaphor. It was a literal advantage in combat. Today, it means dominance in negotiation or strategy. But it began with blood, blades, and the physics of survival. Number 16. Saying go the extra mile. Under Roman law, citizens were required to carry a soldier's gear for 1 mile, but some went further to show loyalty or defiance. That act of going beyond obligation became a symbol of effort and commitment. Today, it's a compliment. Back then, it was a political statement made with aching shoulders. Number 17, saying, mind your P's and Q's. In Old English pubs, bartenders tracked how many pints and quarts you drank, and if you got rowdy or forgot your tab, they'd warn you to mind your P's and Q's. A reminder to watch your manners and your measurements. It wasn't spelling, it was sobriety, civility, and the economics of alcohol. Number 18, saying spill the beans. Ancient Greek voting involved placing beans in jars. White for yes, black for no. And if someone knocked over the jar and spilled the beans, the secret vote was exposed. It wasn't gossip, it was political sabotage. Today, it's playful. Originally, it was a breach of democratic trust. Number 19, saying turn a blind eye. Admiral Horatio Nelson, blind in one eye, was ordered to retreat during battle, but he raised his telescope to the blind eye and claimed he couldn't see the signal, choosing defiance over obedience. Turning a blind eye began as strategic rebellion, not ignorance. Every time you say it, you're referencing a moment of heroic disobedience. Number 20, saying read the Riot Act. In the 18th century in England, if a crowd got too rowdy, officials would read the Riot Act aloud, and if people didn't disperse within an hour, they could be arrested or killed. Today's stern warning comes from a literal threat of violence. Number 21, saying get cold feet. The phrase cold feet didn't start with weddings. It started with war. In military slang, soldiers who lost their nerve before battle were said to have cold feet, a physical symptom of fear and hesitation. Over time, the phrase slipped into civilian life, especially around big commitments like marriage or public performance. But its roots are in the trenches, in the moment where courage falters and the body betrays the mind. So when you say someone's got cold feet, you're echoing a battlefield ritual of doubt. Number 22, saying hit the hay. Before modern mattresses, people slept on sacks stuffed with hay or straw, often laid directly on wooden frames or the floor. Hitting the hay was a literal act, grabbing your bundle, laying it down, and collapsing into sleep after a long day. It wasn't cozy, it was survival. The phrase stuck as a casual way to say goodnight, but it began as a reminder that rest was earned, not given, and that comfort was once measured in handfuls of dried grass. Number 23, saying caught between a rock and a hard place. This phrase comes from early 20th century mining towns, where workers were forced to choose between dangerous jobs in the mines, the rock, or unemployment and poverty, the hard place. It wasn't metaphorical, it was brutal reality. The phrase captured the feeling of being trapped by systems bigger than you, where every option carried risk and every decision felt like a loss. Today, we use it to describe dilemmas, but it was born from desperation. Number 24, saying deadline. During the American Civil War, prison camps drew literal lines in the dirt. If a prisoner crossed it, they were shot without warning. That line was the deadline. It wasn't a metaphor for urgency. It was a boundary between life and death. Over time, the word was adopted by journalists and publishers to describe time limits, but its origin is soaked in violence. Every time you say deadline, you're invoking a rule that once meant execution. 25, saying in the nick of time. In Old English courts, a tally stick was used to mark time and attendance. Each notch, or nick, represented a moment, and arriving in the nick of time meant showing up just before the final mark was made. It wasn't poetic, it was accounting. The phrase evolved into a symbol of last-minute salvation, but it began as a wooden record of punctuality, where one nick could mean the difference between being counted or forgotten. You've just uncovered the hidden code behind 25 everyday things you say or do. Now it's your turn to decode your own life. Pick one phrase you use without thinking. Trace it. Question it. Rewrite it. Because once you understand the story behind your habits, you stop being a passenger and start becoming the author. If this episode made you see your world differently, share it. And if you want more mythic breakdowns of the rituals you live by, subscribe. We're just getting started.